But a lot of the shapes and forms that I'm interested in has everything to do with supple, sensual, organic. That's not something that people get to know about glass in terms of how it's formed, because they don't see it in a liquid state.
Nikolas Weinstein is a versatile glass artist working in San Francisco's Mission District.
Good.
He and his ensemble of glassblowers work around the clock, producing innovative pieces both small and large.
I come at glass from an angle that doesn't have to do with glass. Some would say I have a sort of absolute disregard for the way you're supposed to do it, so I end up usually thinking of what I want to do and then figuring out how to do it. We still may end up press molding it, but I want the stretch of the bubbles, which is why press molding wouldn't work.
I think that was the best one.
I cut myself. You cut yourself a lot when you're working with glass.
Nick's there for you.
Hello, Nick.
Nikolas is always pushing the limits of what glass can do. Risky business for such a fragile material.
Hey, Ron. That's Nick once the air hose in. Stop. Get the top.
There have been plenty of difficult times where you're here at 11:30 at night for the 6th night in a row, and you're convinced that no matter what you do, what's sitting in the kiln is going to break again, and you know how it's going to break, and it's going to be the same time as last time, and you have no sense that the next time you do it, it's going to be any different.
Nikolas melts hundreds of pounds of pure sand, also known as silica, in a furnace at over 3,000 degrees. From the molten glass, he can begin shaping and molding. The liquid glass hardens quickly, so he has a very short window in which to work.
You know, when you start and you get to play with the glass and the fire and the stretching and the cutting, that all of those moments where you didn't think the piece would curve that way when you pulled it, that's what I'm trying to get in the bigger stuff. I'm trying to get that same very simple moment where you pull the glass and it either does what you expected or didn't do, but it's always a very sort of fluid, immediate sort of response in the material.
Justin, remember you have to turn that up.
Nikolas got the opportunity to test new methods, both aesthetically and technically, when he was asked by world-renowned architect Frank Gehry to build an enormous glass installation for Gehry's new building in Berlin.
This is a 1:10 scale model of Berlin that we made when we began working on the project. When we went into this, we really didn't know how we were going to do it. The project was certainly not driven by assessing what we knew how to do and what was available and what we were capable of. Instead, the project began with what we thought would be great in the space, what would be interesting, and then everything worked back from there in terms of trying to figure out a way to render that, not only aesthetically, but technically. There are about 2,000 or 3,000 tubes in the entire installation, and all of them are in a very particular and unique configuration. So we brought in a physics PhD to write a custom program that would help to arrange those tubes and essentially give you a computer map as to how to lay out every single panel when you build it.
We'll go back to the box. 60 at 220, and then at 25 at 215.
So in order to build these panels, we built a custom kiln just for this project, which had a floor that could change shape in real time, and that's how these panels were formed. If you look under here, there's all the pads have come up, and if you kind of get up underneath, you can see that they're actually pressing against the underside of the glass.
Stopper gleich ran.
Mr. Gehry was looking for a way to distinguish this smaller roof from the parent roof at the top of the building. So the idea was to sort of make a sculpture that really covered the entire area, but that also left a lot of negative space open so that you could appreciate that huge vaulting space above.
Since Berlin, Nikolas has continued his work with large-scale glass sculptures. This mock-up for a residence in Pebble Beach, California, will eventually weigh 3 to 4 tons. The core is a metal armature threaded with thousands of large glass beads. With its bendable metal framework, the piece offers Nikolas a new way of presenting his glass sculptures.
I have a pretty good idea of what I want the glass to look like. This stuff is too varied. I think, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of visual chatter. In other words, you see the beads growing and shrinking in diameter. So when your eye looks at them, right, you want to see a continuous line up. And if you see them popping in and out, it breaks up your ability to sort of slide right up the length of this thing. So, we're going to need to figure out a way to produce a lot of these, thousands of these, such that they're all the same diameter. It's just a matter of making a lot of them and making a lot of them the wrong way and figuring out which way is the best. But, it's beginning to do what I want it to do. We're at Western Steel and Wire Company, and we've come down here to pick up some steel to experiment with back at the studio. Yeah, that's
going to be too small for you.
My sense is that I'd be a little bit nervous about, until I get the numbers back from the engineer, I just at least want to choose something. I'm not going to be loading this thing up, so if it pops, it's not the end of the world, but I'd prefer it not to pop while I'm experimenting.
Well, you tell me then.
Steel works well for expressing a shape that has very sinuous curves and that resists the way that you're shaping it. As long as you don't deflect it too much, it's always fighting to get back to where it used to be. And so a lot of the shapes that you get have that tension where pieces are trying to unfurl. Okay, great.
Okay,
So
that
14,
ought to be enough
15.
for you. 15, 16, 18. You want me to label them?
50, I just
Can
want to
you
make sure that
remember
I
those?
remember the range, because when I get back to the shop, I'm not going to remember anything.
Oh, well.
Or at least if you write it down,
I'll write it down. Thank you.
I'm almost there. Okay. I'm almost there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Although this sculpture is glass, it does have that skeleton that's out of metal, and so it allows you to sort of dynamically shape the glass. You can get up on a ladder and you can crank it down and change the shape, torque it a little bit. Yeah, you can let it out a little bit. Down a little bit. Oh, look at that. It climbs up. You arrive at the interesting stuff when you don't know where you're going. Just let it out a tiny bit. Or you don't know how you're going to get there, I guess is a better way of saying it. You want to try lifting it again? Most of the new stuff that's done in any field is often arrived at by mistake. You didn't intend to put and you end up with something that you never would have expected. You start imagining a way that you want to build something or what's the most sort of expressive shape, but that ends up running into this whole technological concern that changes the entire direction of the project. And that's the unquantifiable, that's the curveball that makes the process creative. Because if you know what you're going to do when you start, then why even build it?